Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is about plea bargaining. When it comes to the criminal justice system, there are two people who are in a crime. One is the accused, the other is the victim. Who is the accused? He is a person or an individual who has committed a crime. Who is the victim? He is a person or an individual who has suffered from that particular crime. So there has been an infliction of pain, grief on the victim by the accused. Therefore, under this criminal justice system, for all the crimes that have been committed by the accused with respect to the crime, he will be enforced with the penological principles of punishment as well as fine. The state also has a role to play in this. The state has an obligation, it also has the duty to prove the offender guilty of all the criminal charges that he is accused of beyond any reasonable doubt. So the state as a prosecutor will have to prove that it is this person accused who has committed this crime, and only then the court will step in, it will convict the person, and the convict has to serve the jail term and pay the fine in few cases as well. This is how the general proceedings happen when it is with respect to a criminal law. However, there is an alternative as well. What is this alternative? Is what is called as plea bargaining. What is this plea bargaining? Let me explain this for you. Let's suppose I have committed an act of robbery. This is a crime according to Indian Penal Code under section 393 of the Indian Penal Code. Or I have committed cheating. This is also a crime under Indian Penal Code under section 420. So for all these crimes, let's assume that the imprisonment is for about 7 years. So the court convicts me and I have to serve a jail term of about 7 years. But I do not want to serve about 7 years of jail term. So what do? I plead guilty. I go to the prosecutor. Who is the prosecutor? He is the one who is representing the victim or the state. So I go to the prosecutor. I ask the prosecutor, dear prosecutor, while all these trials are being conducted, I prove guilty. Yes, I have done something which is wrong. So what I ask the prosecutor is, for all the things that I have done, I can pay the fine, I can pay the compensation. So you reduce this particular imprisonment term. So what is the maximum term? It is about 7 years. So I plead guilty. So this term can be reduced to about 3.5 years, or it can be reduced to about 2 years. So this is what is called as plea bargaining. So what is this plea bargaining? It refers to a person charged with a criminal offense negotiating with the prosecution for a lesser punishment than what is provided in law by pleading guilty to a less serious offense. This was not initially present in the Indian criminal justice system, but it was introduced in 2006 as part of set of amendments to the CRPC as a chapter containing sections 265A to 265L. This was not present initially, but this for the very first time was floated by the Law Commission of India. The Law Commission of India in its 142nd report as well as in its 154th report recommended the plea bargaining should be introduced in the Indian criminal justice system. Why was it asking for the introduction? That was because it felt that large number of cases that are present in the criminal courts can be reduced with the plea bargaining. The same was also suggested by the Malimat committee, which also asked for introducing the plea bargaining in India. Basically, this idea of plea bargaining was initially taken from the United States of America. Now the question is plea bargaining allowed for all types of cases? Are there any exceptions to it? Is what we have to look at. When it comes to the United States of America, it is the prosecutor who goes to the accused and asks for plea bargaining. But when it comes to the Indian system, what we have is the accused who goes to the court of law, and the court of law will then guarantee permission for plea bargaining. Cases for which the practice is allowed are very limited. It allows plea bargaining only for certain cases and not for all types of cases. So what are the cases that it allows where plea bargaining can take place? This includes where the maximum punishment is imprisonment for about 7 years. In case there is a crime and for this particular crime the imprisonment is only for 7-year term, then this particular plea bargaining can be initiated. But let's suppose if there are offences which are punishable with death or imprisonment for life or imprisonment for a term exceeding 7 years, plea bargaining cannot be initiated by the accused. It also allows the plea bargaining for cases where the offenses don't affect the socio-economic condition of the country, and in case there are offenses which are committed against a woman or a child which is below 14 years of age, again plea bargaining cannot be initiated. These are some of the things that we have to understand as to where plea bargaining can be initiated. How does this process work? Let's suppose I have committed robbery or I have committed cheating. So I am ready to pay for the fine or for the compensation of the victim. So what do I have to do? I have to file a petition and an affidavit with the court of law. And this particular petition and affidavit should be a voluntary act. Why is the voluntary act very important here? Let's suppose I have not committed the crime in this particular case, but because of my poverty, because of my ignorance, because I do not know what the law says, or because the prosecution has been strong, or there is constant pressure from the prosecution, I accept these charges and I may prove guilty. So that is why the court looks into this particular analogy and it asks me whether this is a voluntary act or I have been forced or coerced by the prosecution. After it has been proved that this is a voluntary act, the court issues a notice to the prosecutor. Then the court will also ensure that there is in-camera hearing of all this voluntary act, and ultimately all the parties to the crime enter into a consensus. They enter into a mutual agreement. So this mutual satisfaction is the last stage of plea bargaining. What happens in this mutual satisfaction? So you have the accused, you also have the victim, you have the prosecution, you have the defense, you also have the investigative counsel as well. All these people are parties to the crime. They enter into a consensus, and on mutual satisfaction and on formalizing the agreement, what they all do is that this particular person's crime will comparatively be reduced. This is what is called as plea bargaining. What is the significance of plea bargaining? When it comes to the Indian courts, we know for the fact that there are large number of cases, millions of cases, and we also know that justice delayed is justice denied. In order to make sure that there is faster trial of all these cases, plea bargaining is one of the asset when it comes to speedy trial. When it comes to the criminal justice system, there are huge number of cases. What this also adds to is litigation costs, paying the advocates huge amount of money. But when it comes to this particular plea bargaining, what we will also see is the litigation cost will be comparatively reduced, and it will also relieve the parties of all the anxieties. Then there are also under trials who are not convicted, but the court of law keeps them languishing in jails. So such people can also enter into an agreement of plea bargaining and immediately get reduced their term, and what this will lead to is reduce the pendency of cases and also decongest all the prisons through the plea bargaining. These are some of the significant aspects with respect to plea bargaining, but there are some concerns as well. There are issues as well. What are these issues and concerns? Let's suppose there is an individual who has not committed this particular crime. The prosecution or the investigating agencies can force the accused to accept this particular crime by either giving him money or because of his poverty or a threat from the outside forces as well. This ultimately means that there is lack of fair trial that is given to this particular person, and at the same time there can be a possibility of accused who is a politician, or it can be a gunda who can also threaten the accused and ultimately force the accused into this particular plea bargaining as well. This will mean that there is an easy way out for the accused because of plea bargaining as well. So what we have to understand is that plea bargaining is beneficial to the accused as well as the victim of a crime. However, what we have to ensure is that all the safeguards, precautionary measures are taken to prove that this particular process is not abused by the accused or by the victim. Why are we discussing all this? That is because members of the Tablighi Jamaat belonging to different countries have obtained release from the court cases in recent days by means of plea bargaining. They were accused of violating the visa conditions, and that is where they have entered into a consensus with the prosecution, and they have been imposed with fine, and they have paid the fine, and they'll have their releases very shortly. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says psoriasis drug in COVID-19 therapy. There is a company called as Biocon. This is a major pharmaceutical company. Recently, it came out with an announcement that its drug called as itolizumab was given permission by the Drug Controller General of India. Why? For treating the cytokine release syndrome. In this particular backdrop, let us try and understand about this drug and also about the monoclonal antibodies. First up, let's try and understand what is this itolizumab. This is nothing but a monoclonal antibody. It was basically used for treating psoriasis. What is this psoriasis? This is nothing but a skin disorder. What happens? The skin cell starts multiplying 10 to 15 times faster than what is usually seen during normal circumstances. This makes the skin look like a bumpy red patches covered with the white scales. What is this monoclonal antibody? There are two types of antibodies. One is what is called as natural. The other is what is called as artificial. What is this natural antibody? This is present in our body as a natural process. Let's suppose there is a foreign pathogen which enters our body. This causes infection. The antibodies fights the infection naturally. This is produced by our immune system. What is this artificial antibodies? These are nothing but developed in the laboratory settings. These are man-made synthetic antibodies that are created in the laboratory settings. Now let's understand what is the meaning of cytokine release syndrome. What is this cytokine? This is nothing but a protein. This is released by the body in order to fight infections that which is resulted because of a foreign pathogen. When this particular cytokine goes overboard in fighting the infection, when there is excessive release of this particular protein, that is what is called as cytokine release syndrome. So when there is excessive production of this protein, what it will result is aggravate inflammation, and at the same time it can also injure the lung cells as well as multiple other organs as well. Now the question is, how are we going to prevent this overreaction of the cytokine? One of the method is to use the antibodies that can block a particular protein called as CD6. What is this CD6? This is a protein that are found on the surfaces of T cells, and these T cells are center to the body's defense mechanism. Experts say if we are able to compress it, if we are able to make sure that its activities are suspended, what we will see is less production of the cytokine. Therefore, in the present scenario, it will be the monoclonal antibody called as itolizumab which will be used for the treatment of cytokine release syndrome. What are the concerns with respect to this activity? When it comes to this particular drug, the critics are pointing out the sample size of the clinical trial is very less. Whenever there is a particular trial that is conducted, it has to be on large number of patients. You need data, you need statistics, you also have to prove that the clinical trials have been successful with respect to large number of patients. In the present scenario, when it comes to itolizumab, the number of patients who were checked for this particular drug activity were very less, say some of the critics. Now when it comes to clinical trials, we have something called as the phase 3 trials. What is this phase 3 trials? This will basically include conducting of this particular trial on hundreds or thousands of patients across multiple centers for number of days and months, and ultimately the researchers would be able to conclude whether this particular drug is effective or not. In the present scenario, DCGI has exempted Biocon from conducting clinical trials in phase 3 and has asked Biocon to directly go to phase 4, which is about post-marketing surveillance. This raises a couple of questions, and one such question is about transparency. How is that the DCGI has been granting permission without even going through the phase 3 and ultimately giving permission for the phase 4 is another important concern. Some experts have also criticized Biocon as well. Why? Because Biocon went to the media, published its report before actually publishing all these data and statistics in one of the important reputed journals. In case it is published in the reputed journal, what will happen is the scientific community will step in, independent experts will step in, they will access and see if their claim is right or wrong. So even before publishing in a journal, they went directly into the media and published their data, and that is another concern, say this particular article. So this is what we need to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Rubber Act of 1947. What is the present context? There have been number of concerns that have been surfacing from the rubber farmers. Why? Because they believe that the center is planning to repeal the Rubber Act of 1947. In this particular backdrop, what we have to look at is what are the concerns from the rubber farmers and what are the various issues that with respect to the rubber industry. First up, let's look up with respect to the rubber board. What is this rubber board? It is a statutory body that which was created under the Rubber Act of 1947. So kindly remember, it functions under the administrative control of Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and the board's headquarters is in Kottayam in Kerala. What are the functions of this rubber board? Basically, this will promote and take up all types of measures as it thinks fit for the development of the rubber industry. So it can take up any types of measures, any type of steps that it feels that will enhance the rubber industry. So what are the functions it basically looks at? It will undertake, assist or encourage all the scientific, technological, economic research with respect to the rubber sector. It will also provide technical advice to the rubber growers. It will improve the marketing of the rubber industry, and it will also advise the central government of all the developments relating to the rubber industry, including the prices, licensing with respect to import and export of rubber as well. What are the various issues and concerns raised by the rubber farmers? The farmers are in an apprehensive mode. Why? Because they believe that the center might repeal the Rubber Act of 1947. In case they do happen to repeal this particular act, what would happen is that this particular rubber board will be dissolved as well. When it is dissolved, what would happen to the pricing? What would happen to the import control? What would happen to the research? What would happen to the subsidies? And what would happen to the extinction of the agriculture and technical assistance that which was given by the rubber board to the rubber sector are some of the questions asked by the agricultural farmers who are working in the rubber sector. These are some of the concerns with respect to the present scenario. However, there have been problems with respect to the rubber industry as well. What are these various problems that has been surfacing with respect to the rubber industry? We have the trade policy reforms that was initiated in the year 1991 and 1992. This is also called as the LPG era, where India did expand and open up its market. So as it opened up its market, we entered into multilateral and regional trade agreements. What this meant was that all the other countries started exporting their products, and we had truckload of imports, and the domestic people, domestic farmers started suffering, and ultimately their profits started reducing. As these reforms were initiated, what we just saw was that the profit started reducing. This means there is poor return for the farmers. They have to pay exorbitant prices for the labor. So this means they do not have profit, and they also have to pay more to the labor. This is where farmers in the rubber industry started moving away from this particular field. They started diversifying or moving this particular farmland to other non-farm activities, depleting the size of the holdings, and ultimately decline in the production of rubber in the domestic circuit. Another reason why rubber industry is not doing good in India is also because of tire industry. When it comes to the tire industry, it consumes about 65 to 70% of the rubber that is produced in the country. But of late, what we see is the tires are imported from some other country. So what we have of the rubber produced in the country is not getting utilized, and as a result, the domestic consumption has reduced, and this particular industry is not doing well. Also remember, from your preliminary examination point of view, Kerala happens to be one of those states which produces about 90% of the total production of rubber in the country. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the importance of vitamin D. There was a paper that was published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This was titled Perspective: Improving Vitamin D Status in the Management of COVID-19. According to this paper, it points out in case there are people who are suffering from diseases like diabetes, heart issues, pneumonia, obesity, and if they are also suffering from vitamin D deficiency, such people can be impacted by the COVID-19. Now the question is, we have to understand the importance of vitamin D. We have to understand how it is produced and what are the steps that the government will have to take up in India. How is it produced is the first question. It is produced when sunlight or artificial light, particularly in the ultraviolet region of 190 to 400 nanometer wavelength, falls on the skin and triggers a chemical reaction to a cholesterol based molecule. This means we have the skin layer, there is sunlight, and when the sunlight falls on the skin, what it will trigger is it will convert the cholesterol based molecule into calcidol in the liver and the calcitriol in the kidney and help in generation of the vitamin D. So what is the importance of vitamin D? Vitamin D is known to help in having the right amount of calcium in the bones, protecting the cell membranes from damage, and also preventing inflammation of the tissues. So whenever we consume the food, the vitamin D helps the body absorb the calcium and phosphate from our diet. So basically these minerals are very important for healthy bones, teeth as well as muscles. These are some of the advantages of vitamin D. The author also brings into another perspective into the picture. He says generally it is assumed that India being a tropical country, individuals and people will not be deficient of vitamin D. Why? Because we have enough amount of sunlight. The same cannot be imagined about the northern countries. Why? Because they have less amount of sunlight. But the author says in spite of India staying in the tropical region, in spite of having enough amount of sunlight, there is contrary that is happening. That is, Indians and its individuals have less amount of vitamin D. The same was published in a paper called a systematic review on vitamin D level in apparently healthy Indian population and analysis of its associated factors. According to this particular paper, it came up with some surprising facts. What are these? That there are large number of Indians who are vitamin D deficient irrespective of their location, whether they are in urban area, whether they are in rural area, based on their age or gender, whether they are poor or rich, all people, most of them are deficient with vitamin D. Looking at all this, we come to a conclusion that vitamin D supplementation is unnecessary for most of the Indians who are currently suffering from vitamin D deficiency. So what does the author say? The author comes up with a recommendation. He says that the central government, the state government and the non-governmental organization have a very sympathetic view towards the public and the people of India. They have been providing free food, they have been providing ration as well, but this is not enough. The government has also taken n number of schemes as well. Midday meal schemes, preschool children and pregnant women are also provided food items under the integrated child developmental schemes. All this is not sufficient because there is lack of vitamin D. So what he says that the government will have to consult the nutritional experts and the institutions and also make vitamin D as part of the ration giving when it comes to addressing the vitamin D. And at the same time, in case it requires a particular dosage, the frequency and other details, the same will have to be provided to the people who are taking these rations, is what the author says, in order to address the issues of vitamin D. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says students with disabilities struggle with online classes. We have been discussing about the issues faced by the disabled students when it comes to accessing the online education. In this particular article, we will focus on four important aspects. One is with respect to the blind students, next with respect to the deaf students accessing the internet, and last is with respect to the special educators. When it comes to the blind students, they will not be able to access the study materials and they'll not be able to visualize the classes. That is the most important factor. Now when it comes to the deaf students, they do not have access to the online classes where there is sign language interpretation, and at the same time the transcripts during this particular video are also not given, so they are not able to understand what is being explained in those videos. The mode of online education also brings a divide. It brings a divide between the haves and the have-nots. Majority of these people who are deaf, dumb and have disability do not have access to the internet, and as a result they are not able to access the videos, they are not able to get the education, and ultimately the people with disability are the major sufferers. And finally, the parents of these disabled children are also suffering Why? Because they are not able to take care of their own children. Taking care of children with disability is an art. It requires special training, so you also require special educators to take care of them. In this particular period, they are not able to take care of them, and as a result, there is emotional and psychological problem to the disabled children is another set of argument. These are some of the issues with respect to this article. We will not have an elaborate analysis. Why? Because we have been discussing about this issue for the last couple of weeks. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, why is India out of Chabahar rail project? This has been explained on our yesterday's CNA and in day before yesterday's CNA and in the past 1 week. So kindly look into this particular issue, and we will not be discussing this issue right now. Let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements with respect to Kanwar Yatra. It is an annual month-long yatra in the Hindu calendar month of Kartika. Shiva devotees walk barefoot with pitchers of holy water from Ganga. Devotees include only men. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why? Because the devotees include men as well as women. Most of them are men, but it also includes women as well. This is not in the Hindu calendar month of Kartika, but instead it is in the Shravana month. That is why the answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Kurma app recently seen in news is an initiative aimed at conservation of, is it Great Indian Bustard, Indian Pangolin, Ganges River Dolphin or Turtle? The answer to this is Turtle. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So basically, this is a collaborative citizen science initiative which provides the database, helps identify species and also lists rescue centers in and around that particular area where turtles have been discovered. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Solar Orbiter mission, which of the following statements is or incorrect? It is asking for the incorrect statement. It is an international collaboration between NASA and Israel Space Agency. This is the first mission that will provide images of the sun's north and south poles. The answer to this is 1 only. Why? The second statement is correct and the first statement is wrong. It is not the Israel Space Agency, but instead it is the European Space Agency. So kindly remember, this is one of the important programs or missions undertaken by European Space Agency as well as NASA. So this program will help us understand how the solar system works, the origins of the universe, and also help us get some information about the fundamental physics at work in the universe. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? Kerch Strait is a state connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Bosphorus Strait is a natural state connecting Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara. It is asking for the correct statement, so the answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given with respect to Ukraine. So kindly remember, the Bosphorus Strait connects the Black Sea with the Sea of Marmara, and we also have the Kerch Strait which connects the Sea of Azov along with the Black Sea. That is why the answer to this is both 1 and 2. Now let's look into the next practice question. Satya Shodhak Samaj organized an anti-caste movement in Maharashtra. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Plea bargaining in the field of law has resulted in reducing the caseload in Indian judicial system, but the critics call it immoral and ineffective. Discuss. What are the difficulties faced by disabled students when it comes to online education? Suggest measures to overcome these issues. So please write all your answers on the comment section and have a peer review. Come up with constructive criticism. In case you have liked our initiative, please do like and comment on our comment section. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.